WRLD's Aileen Love.
Thank you. Our Valley area has a lot of interesting people, places, and things, and that's what our show is about today, people. A very interesting person, a very delightful young person, and one that we can all be very proud of. And her name is Paige McKay. She is a delight to know. She is an extraordinary young person, and I felt like that you would need to know something about people in our Valley area that represent us so well in some other areas of our world. Paige, thank you for coming and welcome.
You're welcome. Thank you very much.
Paige is the daughter of Mr. and Mrs. Jerry McKay in our Valley area, and her life has been so full to be so young, and that's what I wanted to tell you about. If you'll remember, back under the administration of the late John F. Kennedy, we heard an awful lot about the Peace Corps. It was in all of our media. It was something that was to be cherished, to belong to join and serve. But then we went through a lapse of years until we didn't hear very much about the Peace Corps. And then all of a sudden, lo and behold, we have a young lady here in our Valley area that is a member of the Peace Corps in South America. And Paige, that's what I want to talk with you about, is about your work that with you in Honduras. First of all, how did you find out about the Peace Corps in 1986? How did you become involved?
I had always had an interest in learning about other cultures and in traveling, and I think I'm a pretty idealistic person and wanted to do something that would matter and that would help people. And so I started investigating some possibilities. I took some courses in college that investigated what's going on in the third world and got very interested in it and started investigating some of the possibilities that were open to a young person to get some experiences like that. And the Peace Corps was one of the more promising ones. Somebody that didn't have any experience yet working in foreign service could still apply and be selected to serve. And so I began writing the Peace Corps for information. There were recruiters that came to campus while I was at Florida State, and I would talk to the recruiters and get information from them and talk to other Peace Corps volunteers. It was amazing, once I decided to do this, how many Peace Corps volunteers there are. Several of my teachers at the university, once I started talking about this, they said, oh, well, back in 1968 or 1964, I was a Peace Corps volunteer in Ethiopia or Mozambique. And so I got a lot of experience talking to some people in that way. And so that was how I got into it, just asking a lot of questions and doing a lot of investigation, especially through the recruiters that came to campus.
Paige, this sounds like you're typical of what you've been really ever since I've known you. As a young girl, you were active in Girl Scouts. You went to the very height of what Girl Scouts offered. Every badge that was attainable, you got it. You're a graduate of, locally you graduated from
Valley
High School, and then why did you choose Florida State?
That's a long story. I started out as a music major and was taking clarinet lessons from the clarinet professor at Auburn University, who was a graduate of Florida State. So he was very complimentary when he was talking about the music program there, and when I checked it out, I was very impressed. And so that's how I ended up at Florida State. Well, I ended up minoring in music and changing my major to communications, but by that time I enjoyed the campus a lot and decided to stay there.
All right, you're communications major and also music, but now you seem to be going into a diplomatic career instead of otherwise. Have you changed your plans from music to communications at this point?
At this point, what I'm thinking about for the future, I also had a women's studies minor while I was at Florida State, and the work that I'm doing now is involved with women's groups, helping them to develop confidence in themselves, to learn how to plan, to learn how to use the resources that they have available to them, and helping women who have always worked in the home to find ways that they can contribute to their family with income generation and things of that sort. And I've really enjoyed the work that I've been doing with women, so one of the things I'm leaning toward now is furthering that when I get back, furthering my studies and perhaps working with women in, perhaps in counseling or working with women's empowerment or women's rights in some way, women's health, but some of those issues that pertain particularly to women.
All right, let's go back to September of 1986, and this is when you left our Valley area to go to Honduras. You were chosen by the Peace Corps. What about restrictions? Did you have some do's and don'ts that you were told as a Peace Corps volunteer?
Oh boy, we have a lot of those. Before we go to Honduras, we have a three-day orientation in Miami, When we get to Honduras, we have 3 more days of orientation and then a 3-month training period. And during all that period, we learned a lot of do's and don'ts. A lot of them pertain to our health. You know, don't drink unboiled water and don't eat uncooked vegetables and things like that. And I think we were pretty well scared into being healthy people. One of the don'ts is politically, we're supposed to be neutral while we're there. Although it's sponsored by the U.S. government, it's a politically neutral organization. And there are a lot of other suggestions they'd give us that were not set in fast rules.
All right, Paige, when you got to Honduras, then you were assigned, I'm sure, to a locale or a village or something. How was this done? How were you assigned? And where were you assigned?
Well, we have, first we're assigned to the country before we go. Then we get to the country and we have 12 weeks of training. During the first 8 weeks of training, we're evaluated by the trainers and by the Peace Corps staff. And they see what our skills are. And meanwhile, the Peace Corps staff are evaluating different areas that have requested Peace Corps volunteers, different agencies that have requested Peace Corps volunteers. And during that 8 weeks, they try to match our skills and our interests with the skills and interests required of the agencies and the areas that are requesting volunteers. So in the 8th week, we find out where we're going. And I was assigned to a small village called Azacualpa, which is near the city of Choluteca in the department of Choluteca.
All right, what section of Honduras is this in? None of the names are familiar to me as far as, are there small areas, small villages?
Right, Choluteca, instead of states, there are departments in Honduras, and Choluteca is a department. The city of Choluteca is like the capital of that department, and my village is about 2 hours by bus from that city. I say city, it's probably smaller than Valley.
Yeah.
But the area where I am, Choluteca, is in the southern part of Honduras. We're on the Gulf of Fonseca, which is a body of water that borders Nicaragua, El Salvador, and Honduras. And I'm about 5 miles from the Nicaraguan border.
Well, what about the terrain? What type of terrain do you have in this area? Are you mountainous or plains? Are you saying you're near water, but how do...
The area where I am in Choluteca, there are mountains there. It's not the most mountainous area of Honduras, but it's a lot flatter because it is near the water. And also the problem that we're having in Choluteca now, that they've been having for the past about 20 years, is deforestation. And so slowly the climate is changing. It's getting drier and hotter, and it's harder to grow food. Their dry season lasts longer. Their wet season is not as wet as it used to be. And predictions are that if something is not done about the deforestation, eventually, after years and years and years, that's going to turn into desert land. Even I can talk to people who've been living there all their lives, and they can tell me that the climate has changed drastically from the time when they were small to now. It's much drier, and it's much harder to grow things.
You spoke of climate. What's the temperature? What is the mean temperature there?
Where I'm located, it's always summer, comparatively. I don't think it gets much below 95 degrees, and at the hottest, from what I've seen in newspapers, we don't have a thermometer around, in April it can get up to around 120.
So you live in summertime all the time?
All
then.
the time.
Paige, do you miss the seasons from, say, winter, like we have a winter wonderland here?
Oh, I definitely came home. It was the first change of seasons I'd had in a year and a half, and I've really enjoyed the cold weather.
What is the principal, in Choluteca, am I correct? What's the principal livelihood of the people there?
In the department, there's a lot of cattle are grown, and a lot of the people, during the first part of the dry season, grow cantaloupe and watermelon to the Chiquita company. A lot of time,
like the bananas, we always say Chiquita bananas.
Chiquita bananas, it's that company, and they buy the watermelon and the cantaloupe and export it to the States. There's also a product that has just started becoming a moneymaker there. Cashew fruit and cashew nuts are grown there. It was originally, as I understand it, a project of the Honduran government for reforestation. And so the nuts have been, everyone always has eaten the nuts, but now they're beginning to make the fruits into something like a prune and selling those too. And
this is from the cashew, the fruit from the cashew. Unreal, I did not realize that.
And but the majority of the people are subsistence level farmers, and they just a few months out of the year they're able to grow these crops and make money from them. But most of the year they're growing corn and beans and crops such as that for their own livelihood.
Because we're all in America, we always, we feel like we're so fortunate, and we are. What about the average income there? How does it compare to the average income in America?
Well, I'll put it this way. Where I'm living, I'm making about the equivalent of $250 a month, and I'm much better paid than anybody that I live near. And they have families, and I don't. Mm-hmm. I haven't seen any statistics recently, but the last statistics I saw, I believe, were around $100 a person for, I think, a year that was. But it's the income is very low.
Very low. What about the education there? How paramount is it within the family to get their children educated?
That's been one of the problems I've found in working with the groups, because I work with women's groups, and in every group I work with, I'd say the majority of the women don't have any education, can't read or write, and there are just a few who can, and they're usually the leaders in the group. But what I've seen, the older generation, a lot of them don't have any education, and they can't read or write, but their children perhaps have gotten third or fourth grade educations, and now the youngest generation that's in school now, they're trying to get them up to the 6th grade. Just about everybody has the goal of getting their child through the 6th grade. And most families, several families will be able to save enough money to send at least one child on to high school.
Well, this is hard for us to understand and believe, because education is so, we hear it in this country altogether. How do the young people respond to their government? We see a lot of demonstrations here. We see a lot of people that, they'll grab the banner to demonstrate against something. How do the young people respond to the government in Honduras?
The government in Honduras is a democracy, and what I've seen is the more education that the young people have, the more involved they're in, they are in the government, the more they understand of what's going on, and the less it's just, I like this party better than this party without a lot of reasoning behind it. The more education they have, the more they understand the system. And what I've seen in the groups that I work with, the people that have the most education are the ones who are making changes in their community, who have the self-confidence to do it and the skills to do it. And so education appears to be very important to the further development of the country.
Is there a caste system there? Do you have the upper super rich, the middle class, and then the very poor?
Yes, there are very rich and who mostly live in the cities, and a lot of times they'll have farms out in the rural areas, and sometimes the poorer people will work on those farms or work with the cattle. There's a smaller middle class that also usually lives in the cities, and then they're the poorer people, and there are poor people in I guess what we would call slum areas in the cities, and then poor people in the rural areas. There are definitely a lot more poorer people than there are middle class or upper class. And from what I've seen, there's division between them. And I don't know that it's necessarily a malicious thing. It's more that there are different education levels, and you can communicate better with somebody in your own level than somebody from another level. So, but there is a big difference between the richest and the poorest, and it seems like there are a few rich and many poor.
Yes. All right, Paige, what is you said you work primarily with women groups. Now, I'm assuming then you work with adults more than you do with children. Mm-hmm. All right. What is a day like? When you are a week like? What are you directly responsible for?
I'm working with about 5 women's groups, and I visit one each day. And I'm also working with a parents association who's right now making plans to build a new school. When I visit the groups, usually there's an hour or two wait before everybody gets there, because there are no telephones, no telegraphs, and they're never quite sure that you're not going to be sick and not show up, so they wait until you show up, and then they finish making their tortillas before they come. But when the meeting finally starts, it depends on what we're working on. 2 of the women's groups that I'm working with now are planning community well projects, and they're responsible for getting the community involved, for the planning, for soliciting the resources that they're going to need, and for all the general planning. 2 of the other groups have general stores, and they kind of operate like a food co-op. They're able to give credit to the group members. They're able to set their own prices. the store is more conveniently located for the people in that community than other stores. And if there are any profits to be made, they go back into the group's projects. And there's one other group that has bread making cooperative. They make bread twice a week and sell it in the community as a money-making thing for themselves. And there's another group that I'm working with, and we're in like a course to help the women learn some skills that are going to be valuable to them. They've never worked in a group before. It's something new to them, so through this course we're learning how to plan, how to evaluate problems, and just helping the women to develop some confidence in themselves.
Have your Girl Scout skills helped you any while you were down there?
A lot. An awful lot.
Because Paige had been through so many things in Girl Scouts until you learned everything there was to learn. Scouts had to offer, and I'm sure it has. What are the people like, Paige? Do they receive these Peace Corps, you as a Peace Corps worker, do they receive you well?
Very well. That's been the best part. The people that I've met have been the best part of my experience. They're friends now. They are very open to what I have to say, and especially I get a certain amount of respect because I am from the United States and because I have a college education. And but since I've been living with, at first I think they did put me on a higher level, and they would talk to me, but it was not so much as a friend.
Yes.
But I live with them, and I go to the well and draw water with them, and I'll eat beans and tortillas with them, and I play with their children, and so now I'm more like a neighbor, and they treat me as such. But the friends have been, the people are wonderful.
All right, when you're talking about where do you live, what type of living conditions do you have?
I have a small adobe house. It's 3 rooms and a kitchen, a bathroom, a bedroom, and a living area. And it's probably that size house. I know there are families of 10 that live in a house that size. So people think first of all, it's really strange for a single young woman to be living so far away from her family, and then for her to be living alone in such a big house. It's something that's been hard for them.
All right, now who owns this house you live in? Is it owned by our federal government or?
No, I'm renting the house from the sister of my neighbor. Her family used to live
So
there.
you actually pay rent to one of the natives there. All right, and what are your furnishings like on the inside? You could not take anything.